So, hello, my name's Michael Conneely and I'm speaking to you from the far west of Ireland near our healing centre and Airbnb, and this is part 3 of my video presentation of Uranus as Lord of Karma. And each of the videos I'm doing in this huge Lord of Karma series is underpinned by an even more detailed blog, so have a look at that. So basically this part 3 is about the astrology techniques we use to understand Uranus as a Lord of Karma. And if you listen to these videos, what you can then do is get in touch with me for an astrology reading where I use this information and of course much more to depict the karmas in your birth chart and how you might work with them, burning negative karmas or manifesting your special spark of positive benefic karmas. I also of course offer predictive astrology where you can hear what karmic energies are entering your life in the year ahead. And of course I offer relationship astrology. So there's my astrology readings, and there's a whole range of astrology courses I teach in Western astrology and Vedic astrology. So the first thing probably that one would need to consider in any life is what's the balance between Uranus and Saturn. So, Uranus is an energy of revolution, needed change, needed inspiration, fresh new insights. Saturn is an energy of patience, duty, responsibility. They're totally opposite indeed. In the ancient myth, Saturn castrated Uranus, his father. And so the first thing you'd look at is what is your Uranus script and what is your Saturn script. And it really is quite important to see how they can utterly fight each other in your life, produce an endless standoff, damage each other or damage just one of them. What do you stick to? Your patient, repetitive Saturn scripts or your iconoclastic breakout scripts? Which are you going to value? How do you ride those two horses? They're completely different. And of course, all of them are based in past life scripts, karmic scripts. So the second point I'd make is about, we understand Uranus in terms of what house he's in your birth chart. And I look at both Vedic astrology, which uses the sidereal zodiac and declares and is based on your destiny and your incarnational life purpose, and Western astrology, which is a declaration of your psychology, your egoic self. And Western astrology is based on the tropical zodiac, not the sidereal zodiac of Vedic astrology. So it's really important to understand which house is Uranus in your chart. And so in the attached blog I've just given as a pointer to how you decide this, but obviously you can get a reading for me or study one of my wonderful courses. What does it mean if you've got Uranus in the 11th house? So basically, that means that because of past life considerations, this is a person who can't be themselves in groups. In other words, they are fated to live an inner lie about who they are in groups, and there are past lives reasons for this. And so they do their very best, for example, perhaps to fit into the group. And of course groups can be so dysfunctional. They can be led by power stealers, they can be based on idiotic ideologies, etc., etc. And so, the person with Uranus in the 11th house will sort of simper into the group. It affects church affiliations. So you get people simpering up to the altar rail to receive the body and blood of Jesus. Oh yes, I'm a good Catholic. And then they do horrific things to their family members. Happens all the time. So this is all about the manifestation of Uranus in the 11th house. And so if you've got Uranus in the 11th house, you will have a fated predisposition to live a lie, to fit into groups. Well, of course, if you're lucky, those groups will spit you out. If you're lucky, you'll be able to fight back. And the way Uranus works is often by trauma and crisis, often at predicted times in your life. And so basically, it's so helpful to have the statement, well, I've got Uranus in the 11th house, and therefore I need to be very careful how I involve myself in groups, because otherwise you'll be exposed to trauma within groups. And in fact, the divine purpose, the karmic purpose of experiencing a series of trauma in groups is to say, okay, well, I'm not going to live a lie. But the point is, you might not at all know who you are really. Probably your family sort of brought you up in a way that didn't accept who you were at all, imposed a definition of who you were, how you were supposed to behave, what sort of nastiness you were expected to take. And so the trauma, which comes at a predictable period, is about really finding out who you are and then moving on to be open to the inspiration, the rays of inspiration that Uranus brings, so as to become who you are, to manifest the special achievement and sparks that maybe you tried to achieve in past lifetimes and didn't, but let's hope this time you will. Okay, we also look at what sign Uranus falls in your birth chart. And obviously this is generational, so Uranus takes 84 years to go around the chart, and so it'll take about 7 years to go through a sign. So, you can't draw blanket monolithic conclusions about how Uranus will manifest in a particular sign. You have to also look at the house, the aspects, of course. But in general terms, okay, let's give an example. Say you've got Uranus in Cancer. Well, what's Cancer about? Well, Cancer is about maternal caring. And so in general terms, the person with Uranus in Cancer will be exposed to like a lack of maternal caring, or a mother who's very jarring and angry and irritated, something like that. And so you look at, well, what's this person's Cancerian-related past life experiences? Was there imprinting in the womb? What happened when you were in the womb to set up, problems around Uranus energies, which either can be, very driven, there's something wrong, I must sort it out, I'm impatient, I must sort it out. Anything like that. Were there special circumstances in your birth and conception? And what were your childhood wounds? What emotional scripts? So we look at all those. So I've just given one example of Uranus in a house, the 11th, one example of Uranus in the signs, Cancer. Well, let's go on to look at chart aspects to Uranus. So let's take the example of Uranus in aspect to the Sun in your birth chart. So the Sun is the king of your kingdom. He has the power to manage the kingdom and go forth and do what's needed. Or, of course, if your Sun is fallen or problematic in your birth chart, you lack all those. You're weak. You say, let me be the glove that fits another person's hand, blah, blah, blah. Well, when Uranus aspects the Sun, ideally it's supposed to be about inspiration, new creativity, the ability to bring in sudden important developments, to get shaken out of stuck ways, to face life with new courage. And you want the new. But negatively, and this is so important to hear in an astrology reading or study in an astrology course, your life can become wild and chaotic, unpredictable and disruptive, and you can glory in it as you harm your life and harm those around you. And so you can have accidents. Now another thing is, in my readings and courses I teach psychotherapeutic astrology, psychodynamic astrology, psychosynthesis, getting to know the different parts of us. And a big part of that is chart aspect shapes, where the chart draws aspect lines between planets, and those actually form shapes. And you can actually say such a lot about a person from the shapes created by the aspect lines. And so in the blog, I can't show them here, we look at, well, okay, you know, what happens if you have a search figure, a long questing figure drawn by your aspect shapes with Uranus at the end of it? What sort of person will you be? And then there are things called learning triangles, where you move from hard learning situations to questing to understand them, to resting in the solution, and endlessly go through that spiral. Well, what happens if your learning triangle contains Saturn, Mars, and Uranus? You know, we look at all those in an astrology reading, in an astrology course. Now, a very big thing is if you have Uranus retrograde in your birth chart. So this means that you won't easily be able to manifest your revolution when it's needed. You know, you won't sort of trust it. You might get blocked from it. And so, of course, if you're not receiving and expressing your revolution, what happens? Well, either you live a block life as a robot, or Uranus smashes in and your life just falls apart because you were not able to open to the needed revolution and inspiration and understanding and identity of Uranus. You were living a formulaic lie, perhaps. Right, the next thing about Uranus astrology is Uranus in aspects to the nodes of the moon. Now, the nodes of the moon are a statement, when used in your Vedic chart, of your incarnational life purpose and your destiny. And in your Western chart, they're the statement of the psychological self that will be created in relation to your destiny, your life purpose. And basically, if Uranus is conjunct Ketu, the south node of the moon, this is the person who in previous life was a maverick, an eccentric, an individualist. And that can bring, you know, real scripts into this life that you have to work with. And also, it can be the person who benefits from the wisdom of the past. But on a lower level of manifestation, Uranus conjunct Ketu, the south node, is scattered and erratic. Now let's look at Uranus conjunct the north node. So the south node is where we come in from past lives. The north node is where we're thrown towards as our purpose and destiny in this life. So if you have Uranus conjunct Rahu, the north node, you can, you know, be quite sort of inspired and technological, or negatively shocking. It depends how it manifests. You could just be a gadget lover. And then the other big thing to look for is when a planet is square the nodal axis. And so when Uranus is square the nodes of the moon, if you're hearing this in an astrology reading or an astrology course, you can look at how perhaps in past life there was a missed step. You could not bring in your Uranian inspiration. You were blocked. You ignored it. You failed. And so in this life it becomes a particular huge issue for you to solve. So just to move on to Uranus in synastry, or relationship astrology, well, if Uranus is overemphasized, you're intense, you rush in fast to relationship, you want total excitement, or you can create damage from too much wanting of impersonality, freedom and aloofness. Uranus's energy is spasmodic and fluctuating. And so you know, people where Uranus is overemphasized and not understood can get close to someone and then suddenly go distant. Well, how hurtful. You know, this needs to be stated and understood. And Uranus can be the enemy of relationship because it can get frustrated when there's closeness. You know, I want my independence. What do you mean you want love? And then, you know, distance is created and then they're frustrated at the distance. You know, not easy. So Uranus is obviously a most important part to understand in relationship astrology or synastry, and Vedic astrology has the most magnificent astrology of relationships, the Ashtakuta system. You know, have a relationship reading from me, you'll see what I mean. It compares the moons of the couple in many, many different ways, and also Mars and then the other planets. So to give an example, if you have Venus opposition Uranus or whatever, well, you could be quite a techie and so forth, you know, naturally good at gadgets and IT, but you could sort of surf away. So when the nice guy next to you wants to sort of be close and so forth, oh God, he's interrupting my surfing, I was looking up about, etc. You know, it's well worth seeing how Uranus works in terms of relationships. So briefly, to include this part 3 of this presentation of Uranus as Lord of Karma, predictive astrology. So Uranus's orbit takes 84 years. So the first square where Uranus meets, like square or 90 degrees to natal Uranus, is about age 22. So this means, you know, your young son suddenly tours the United States on a motorbike or emigrates to New Zealand. He's expressing difference and freedom. The Uranus opposition occurs around 42 years, and the second Uranus square around 63 years, and the Uranus return when you're 84. And the thing is, say you're having a big Uranus transit. If you want to understand what might happen now, you can look back at when, you know, Uranus was giving this transit earlier. So if you've got like Uranus opposite Sun now, you can look back 42 years ago when Uranus was conjunct your Sun. See what happened then. That can be a guide to what you're offered now. But look at how you handled it then. Look at what the consequences were then. And if there were problems, don't repeat them. Use the previous transit as a guide to the positive potential. So basically, I hope I've given you an understanding of the way Uranus manifests as the Lord of Karma in your life. Get in touch with me for an astrology reading or an astrology course. I teach courses in Vedic astrology and Western astrology. Learn about your Uranus. If necessary, heal and empower Uranus so that the karma is fulfilled and its dangers avoided. Thank you.